Hi, we're chatting today to Kate Ning from who's in the Netherlands, and I was going to be visiting Kate during my Churchill Fellowship trip some time ago. That's obviously been delayed due to the pandemic. But Kate, I'm just wondering how you're coping at this time. What's happening for you in the Netherlands?
Yeah, so here we are in our second lockdown. But first, thank you for having me, Jane. It's delighted to be speaking to you. We are in our second lockdown, and so everything's closed, and school is closed and has been closed since mid-December. Primary school is meant to reopen, daycare is meant to reopen this week, but given the weather, it may not happen. So we'll see about that.
Gee, that must be tough.
Yeah, it's not been great, but I think that there's no right answer for any government and any country in dealing with the pandemic. So, for example, across the pond in the UK, daycare is open, but daycare is closed here. So, and there's curfew in France, but the shops are open during the day. So, you know, with the case figures the way they are, no one really, I think, has a one-size-fits-all approach to managing the situation.
Now, tell us a bit about your work. I mean, I know you from your Time to Sew blog platform, but tell us what you're doing now. Are you still able to do much of that? I see you're busy on social media, busy sewing and unpicking now.
Yeah, I'm always busy with sewing. It's been my lifeline for about 10 years, and it was the hobby that stuck. So since I moved to the Netherlands, I was actually lucky to be able to convert my former corporate life into my sewing life. And now I do things like pattern editing. I work for a magazine, and I do some of their blogger network and again, pattern editing and customer service. And I also teach sewing online and in person, both locally and elsewhere and online. So yeah, it's been great in that sense. It's great for the creative mind. It's less great for, you know, making all the things all the time. So a lot of the things that I make now, because if you're a maker and you work as a maker, then you produce a huge volume of output, obviously. So I've started in the last few months just making a lot of things for other people as well. Otherwise, you know, there's just no way that my closet or my mental state could cope with having that many things.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We do reach saturation point in terms of what we need. Did you find that was different during lockdown, or, you know, during the pandemic, or is this just something evolving in life?
I think it's evolving. During the pandemic, I mean, I think there's been more of a rise in DIY, as a lot of people, you know, who would be normally out and about don't really know what to do with themselves at home. For me, my work got busier, but my life also got busier. So we've got the two kids there, two kids under 5, and they're at home all the time. My other half is home all the time, but he also needs to work. So that's been an interesting adaptation in the house to have everybody around all the time and not sort of step on each other's toes constantly.
So how do you?
So yeah.
How does the day go? What's your daily routine, or is there not such a thing?
We try and have a rough routine. So, you know, we always have breakfast, lunch and dinner around the same times of day. But I think what really helps us is that every morning, because my work is very flexible and freelance, he works full time, but obviously can't really work full time. So, because we both have jobs. So I think every morning we have a conversation about who's got what meetings and who needs what time slots. And so once we can work that out, then we can say, then I'm sort of mentally prepared that, okay, I've got the kids from 9 to 11, and then I've got a meeting at 11, and then we'll swap again at 1 o'clock, and etc., etc. So there's not really a thing that's called, you know, you get 1 day work and I get 1 day work. It's just all a bit of a, it's a bit fluid, but I think it helps to have that conversation at the start of each day, so that you're prepared and you know what you're doing.
So home has become really important during this time, hasn't it? To actually have to have a space, you know, to have shelter. You know, do you have a garden as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And we count our blessings that we moved when we did, because in London we had a small 2-bedroom house with a patio, and here we've got a proper, I don't know, maybe you call it a suburban house with a nice garden. And we've also just lived through a renovation through this time as well. So it's really a joy now to be at home, and we are very lucky in that sense, that we have a space that we can escape to and close the door, which is where we're talking to you upstairs.
Kate, tell us about, like you mentioned that you feel more people are sewing at this time. So what you know, what have you noticed in that space?
I think there's a lot more beginners that I see, especially on social media and commenting and looking at things, which is really good. I really encourage people to be sewing, because then they have more of a connection and more of an understanding of how stuff works. And sometimes they think it's actually quite magical that they can turn, and I've seen the word magic used on social media, that they can turn a flat bit of fabric into something that they can wear, and that it's amazing. So for me, it's more of a life skill. It's like cooking in some sense. You just have to learn it and sort of get good at it, and then you can do it. And it's really good for your mental health, I think, that you can just sort of dig your head into it and then not come out of that bubble for 2 or 3 hours. And then at the end of the day, you've got something. So yeah, much as the same hobby as, you know, gardening or cooking, it's got that same kind of therapeutic effect. It just takes longer. Well, gardening also takes quite a long time, and you have to be patient.
And you do just learn by doing, don't you? Like there's no fast track to being able to do it. You just learn through a process of experimentation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often have people coming to me and contacting me asking, you know, which is the best machine to buy, or, you know, what can I do to make my insides better, or what can I do to make it fit better? And as you said, there's no hard and fast rule. You just have to try it. And I sewed on a very basic machine for 10 years or so before it finally broke down on me. And it went through some intensive sewing. You know, it sewed all manner of trousers and jackets and even quilts and what have you. So I really beat it up, beat it to death. I still teach on it sometimes, but yeah, so I always say you don't need any fancy equipment. You just got to do it. Like there's so many things, as with any hobby, there's so many things that you can buy. You can buy the best saucepans in the world or the best frying pan, but if you don't know how to fry an egg and what temperature you're meant to use, then it's not going to happen. So it's just practice, trial and error. And I guess like there's also a bit of an art in choosing what fabric goes with what kind of thing you want to make, isn't there? So if you want to make a tunic, for example, then if you make it in cotton, it's going to look very different from if you made it in a viscose or a tencel. And things like that also just require practice and trying it out and see what you like.
Yes, and I noticed you're doing a bit of upcycling as well, reusing some denim to make a hat.
Yeah, I really enjoy the upcycling part, usually of the things that I've made previously, which haven't been that good, or if I just don't like it anymore. I feel better about upcycling things that I made myself rather than cutting up ready-to-wear clothing, except for bed sheets. I don't really have an attachment to bed sheets. And chopping those up for, you know, garment samples and test experiments. But I think, yeah, if you don't like it anymore, you can always do something to change it. And I prefer to do that on my own stuff rather than ready to wear, because I feel that if I've got good quality ready to wear, then that could be donated and resold. So as long as it's a quality that I feel like someone else could wear and you know, and it could be resold, then I would rather do that. Because in the stuff that I make myself, I might have made a few tweaks to the fit here and there, and then it stops being a completely standard garment.
Yes.
And handmaids, I'm sorry to say, I don't believe that they're ever going to be the same level of quality in some ways as a factory-made garment, because an individual machine operator, you don't have the same equipment, you don't have the same kind of quality control. And if you're not an expert seamstress, which I'm certainly not, then yeah, you can buy better sewn clothes at, say, H&M than I would make. But I have more of a connection to my clothes. So I think that's
that's why you do it. So tell us why you do it then. Why do you sew yourself?
Why I sew? Because I really enjoy being able to make the things that I can't buy in shops. Because if you go into a shop, then you're kind of dictated by what someone else has already put there. So that's the selection that you've got. So using a cooking analogy again, it's like going into the store and seeing all the ready meals and the meal kits that you could make, that you could have if you need some inspiration. Or you could go to the fresh section and the other, raw ingredients type section, and then do it yourself and work out what it is exactly that you want to have. So if you're making a curry or a stir fry or a pasta, it doesn't matter. You can either choose to have, someone else can choose all the ingredients for you, or you can go and do it yourself and have it exactly how you want. So I think that's the difference.
In a time-pressured world, is it an indulgence to make from scratch yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I certainly don't, I make a lot, but I don't make everything that I wear or that I want to wear. I'm a big fan of secondhand platforms. There's one called Vinted that's popular in Europe, where people just sell off their the items from fashion brands. And if I buy stuff, I buy a lot from there as well. But yeah, it's definitely a luxury, because craft materials, if you buy them as raw materials, you are buying them as the end consumer. So the price of that raw material, so in sewing, it would be, your fabric, your thread, your zips, your buttons, everything. You pay retail price for that. And that's going to be sometimes more expensive than the thing than the finished garment that you buy in the store. So it's not about, what's cheap and what's good. It's about what you personally want to have and therefore make yourself. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, very interesting. And so in terms of your observations over time, because you've obviously sort of been sewing for quite a while from what I know of your work, and so where do you think, what observations do you have about, slow fashion and sustainable fashion? Where do you think we're up to with that, Kate?
Look, I think sustainability itself has become more mainstream as a concept, but whether people are doing what they say they think they will is a different idea altogether, especially when there's a price point involved. So for someone who previously might have bought a lot of fast fashion to suddenly switch to sustainable fashion, then it might become at an unaffordable price point. Because if you're a sustainable brand and you care more about the way that your products are produced and where they come from, then you still need to turn a profit margin and your prices are going to be higher, right? So you can always argue that, well, instead of buying 10 t-shirts at H&M, I could also just buy one t-shirt. But that's a really hard mindset shift for someone to make who's never done that before, right? And when it comes to the crafting community, I think craft is people don't craft because they want to be sustainable, right? People craft because it's good for their mental health and they like to do something with their hands and it's really rewarding. So whilst there is a lot of chat around sustainability, it's more around the reusing, what can you upcycle that you already have? Can you reuse all your scraps? can you use a pattern that uses all of the fabric? So we call that zero waste, rather than, you know, if you cut out a skirt that that's in a circular shape, then you've got lots of leftovers, for example. So it's more about sort of those sorts of changes rather than really thinking deeply about the environmental and the social justice impact, because crafting doesn't, or sewing doesn't give you an automatic out from fast fashion. You're still buying fabric, you're still consuming, and I can make a t-shirt in 45 minutes to an hour. So if I really wanted to have all the t-shirts, then I can just do that without any problems really whatsoever, as long as I've got the equipment and the fabric to do so. So I think that's also a shift that crafters perhaps would like to make, but it's very difficult to know, to have transparency around what you're buying. You don't have that in the same way that you do in fashion. But what I do like about crafters is that they are very resourceful, and they also don't like to waste things that they've, you know, already spent the money on. So if you've got a leftover bit of fabric from a garment, you're not going to chuck that out easily. You will do something else with it at some point in time. Maybe it's a bit of hoarding action going on there, but yeah, so there's goods and there's bads. I think, like I said, I just think the conversation is more mainstream, but actually implementing change at scale is a difficult thing. And to be honest, you know, you can worry about sustainability in your clothes and what have you, but I'd also much rather you didn't get on a plane or you switch to green energy in your home. You know, there's bigger things that we could be doing on an individual level to be making impact. But if you're thinking about it, then that's a good start.
Yes, well, that's very sound words. Thank you for that. So just returning to, you know, the pandemic, where do you think things are going? Like it has had a bit of a impact on sustainability because we're not able to travel. Where do you think, you know, we might be in a couple of years' time with socially, you know, culturally, what sort of changes economically from this period of time?
You know, I was quite hopeful for some kind of sustained, lasting change at the beginning of the pandemic. But because I just saw, because it was such a sudden change for all of us, wasn't it? That it felt like a really good opportunity to rethink our whether it's our economic systems on a more local level. You know, it'd be too much to be asking at a national level, but and people's behaviour. But I think the longer the pandemic wears on, and you know, people start to really get COVID fatigue. And when you have fatigue in this kind of way, you really just want things to go back to normal and back to the way they were. So you've swapped. So maybe you might buy a few less clothes because you know, you don't have the means to go out and try things on. But you might also be getting your fulfillment, I guess, from your online shopping, and then you try things on and then you return them. And I think we know that not all returned clothes are resellable again, but you still need some kind of outlet. So I think unless people have really found an outlet for the things that they want to do and want to buy, for example, then it's really hard to still change that behavior. So I must say, Jane, I don't really see a massive shift, but I hope that we will continue on the path that we were already on in terms of sustainability and behaving in a more environmentally sound manner, and hopefully, you know, being more human. And I really hope that the social justice aspect will improve as well. But you know, we've seen so many horrendous incidents around the world recently that I'm not sure about that yet. But
it's really hard, isn't it? Because there's so little impact that we can really have. But what's just to finish off, Kate, like one piece of advice do you have for, you know, moving forward with COVID or without COVID?
Yeah, I think it's nice to spend some time getting to know yourself and the things that you like to do and the things that you don't like to do, and really understanding what kind of motivates you to keep going. So for me, you know, there's the essentials of my family life, and yep, they drive me crazy and batty sometimes, and we all drive each other crazy. And then also accepting also that there's nothing you can do about these situations really in your personal life. You know, you can shout and scream and be angry at it, but the reality is there's still a curfew in our case. Schools are still closed, and you can't influence that right now. Whether that's right or wrong, okay, that's a matter of personal opinion. But if you have at least that acceptance that you just have to deal with it for this period, then I think that also makes it easier to think, right, I'm just going to calm down now because there's nothing I can do. So then I can just get to know myself really well, get to know the things that, you know, make me tick and things that really, you know, irritate me. And then I can manage that, and I can manage that better in my everyday life. So I think that would be my advice.
Well, that's great wisdom. Thanks very much for that, Kate. That's great.